Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make some creamy tomato basil soup with a roast beef and cheddar melt and some kind of old-fashioned lunch lady bars, those delicious peanut butter bars. So let's start out by getting our onions caramelizing up for our soup and get that process going, and then we'll work on crushing up our graham crackers for our peanut butter bars. Here. And then we'll give a nice, since we're going to be pureeing this soup, we don't need to have a super fine dice on it because we'll be blending it nice and smooth. And let me grab a little bit of olive oil over here. And that way we can saute it up in some olive oil. Need about, I want to say around a tablespoon or so. You don't need too much though. We'll get this heating up. We'll let them kind of start to caramelize, bring out their natural flavors. And then we will add in some garlic, tomatoes, and fresh basil because it's such a simple but delicious and easy soup. So while those are sauteing, we can start working on our peanut butter bars, which are one of my favorites. But that's because I just love anything with peanut butter and chocolate. It's so good. Give this a good stir. Okay, so for our peanut butter bars, we are going to start by mixing together a half a cup of room temperature butter with 1.5 cups of peanut butter. And with your peanut butter, you don't have to get like a perfectly measured 1.5 cups, just enough to, just in the ballpark. There we go. For some reason, I thought I was out of peanut butter, I guess the last couple of times that I went to the store, and now I realized I have like 3 full containers of peanut butter. So I was like, we need to do something with peanut butter. We're going to do 1.5 cups of peanut butter. Again, I'm going to just kind of eyeball it. And here I feel like you can't go too wrong if you use too much or whatnot. That looks pretty close to 1.5 cups. Pop that over here, and then we're going to add in a half a cup of peanut butter and butter, and then we're going to kind of whip them together until we have this really smooth peanut butter base to this. Now we will use a little bit more peanut butter when we make our chocolate peanut butter topping to go on top of it to kind of melt it, but we don't need that for a few more minutes. Get my hand mixer plugged in over here. I find you can always do this with your hands, but it's a little bit easier to use a hand mixer or a stand mixer. I'm going to whip these guys together until that peanut butter and that butter are all nice and smooth. And you're going to want to use room temperature butter with this because if it's cold, it will take forever to get it nice and smooth. And you don't want to have chunks of peanut butter or chunks of butter in there. You want it to whip up nicely. There we go. And now it's almost like a very velvety, smooth peanut butter here. It almost kind of falls apart. It's nicely. And then we're going to add in our powdered sugar. We're going to use 1.5 cups of powdered sugar. And we'll whip that in there as well. So 1.5 cups. It's a little more. There we go. And then we'll whip that into our peanut butter and butter mixture until it's nice and smooth on there. And it's going to be like a thicker type basting. And then we'll crush up our graham crackers. But we want to make sure we get this nice and kind of whipped up smoothly on here. Make sure we don't have any kind of balls of powdered sugar. should be good. I'll set this to the side for just a second. And let's give our onions over here a nice little stir. Kind of mix them around. And I'm going to chop up some garlic and we'll get ready to add our garlic in there. And then we'll get our tomatoes prepped up. So I've got some fresh garlic here. Open this up. We'll mince them up. Again, I'm going to mince them. You don't have to go super small on them because we will be pureeing this soup, so it will get to a nicer consistency, but you want those flavors to infuse out. I'm using a good amount. This will probably be around 2 tablespoons of garlic by the time we have it minced up, and that's because I just love a good amount of this garlic in this soup because it's a very simple soup, and really the flavors come together are basil and garlic, and it's just lovely. So we'll mince this up. Don't worry if you have some bigger chunks, but for the most part, just nice and small. That way you can kind of crisp up and infuse some of these flavors in a little bit more. And should be good enough. We're going to add this to our onions. That way it has a chance to kind of saute for a few minutes. And get that nice kind of garlicky flavor out because we really do want the onions and the garlic to really kind of caramelize up and get their natural flavors. And while we're waiting, I've got a whole bunch of plum tomatoes, Roma tomatoes that we are going to chop up for this to make it a nice, really fresh tomato basil soup. Okay. We'll give this a nice little chop here, and we're going to get these into our thing to kind of cook up nicely. And we'll pop them in there for this. And then we're going to finish up our peanut butter bars and our grilled cheeses. This is luckily like a nice kind of quick little lunch that you can make on, you know, a nice kind of day where you just want a nice soup and a grilled cheese melt for this. And who doesn't love a good peanut butter bar for this? Here, I'll slide these guys in and give them a quick little dice up here. And you don't have to cut them super small because, again, we are going to be pureeing them nicely for our soup. I'll grab a few more in here. Give this a nice little toss up. Smells just wonderful with that garlic and a nice little delicious base for it. I'm going to add in about, I think, a few more. We'll get that going. And then we're going to crush up our graham crackers and we will mix those into the base of our peanut butter bar, which is going to be just fantastic. Here. And we'll get these last few in there. And we're going to have this nice and let this simmer up for, you know, about 5 minutes or so. And then we'll add in a little bit of broth here. Okay, for our graham cracker crumbs here, we're going to add in our little bars right here. We're going to crush these up, and this is going to mix into the base of it. I'm going to turn on my back little burner here, and we're going to get our water going for our double boiler so that we can melt our chocolate up and cover it for this. And then in a few minutes, we might need to take a little bit of a break. We see we've got somebody stopping by here, and so we might take a quick pause, and then we'll kind of come right back. But a surprise visit. I just got a text saying, "Oh, I'll be right over." So we might have to take like a 5-minute pause for them. They're just dropping something off for us. But we'll get these in here I'm going to save some of these. These are alphabet graham crackers, but I'm going to put some on top just like I do with my Teddy Grahams. We need about 3 cups of graham cracker crumbs. So I'm going to smash these up. You could always use the graham cracker little bars. I'm going to use my hefty marble rolling pin because this really does a great thing. And let's squeeze some of this air out. And what you can do just to get this, you can always use this in a food processor, but you're just going to roll this over. There we go. We'll kind of flip it up and get them here. Now, I prefer my graham cracker crumbs a little bit more chunky in my peanut butter bars, but if you like a smoother consistency, then you could put them in a food processor and process them up. But I like that crunch that you get in every little bite. So I don't want them too small. I don't want them too large, but just nice, almost ones where you have some that are about the size of like chocolate chips. So good. Okay, so good size here, kind of big chunks in there because that once you get into the peanut butter gives you this nice little crunchy base for it. Let's get our chocolate in here so that it can kind of start melting up for this on here. And we're going to get this here going for this is a jumbo bag. You need only about a bag, like a regular bag. So I'm only going to use about half of this on here for this because this is a jumbo bag, but a regular size bag of chocolate chips are about 2 cups for this. And we'll get that kind of going here. And you need to add in 1/4 cup of peanut butter for this because that's going to melt with the chocolate, give it kind of like a softer kind of texture to it, which adds just this wonderful, delicious kind of flavor base for it. Let me get these mixed up. Look at that. Those tomatoes are looking pretty fantastic for this on here. And we'll kind of move this around. Just a nice little poke in here. And then we're going to add in a little bit of liquid to this. We don't need too much because the tomato is going to add a big base. And if you have too much liquid, you're not going to have a nice thick kind of bisque-like texture. So I'm going to add in about, let's see, I might just add in a cup. I always like to see exactly where it sits on my tomatoes, but essentially where it just barely covers the tomato because we will use a little bit of cream in here to get our soup to kind of get that rich, creamy flavor. Now, you don't have to add the cream, but it does add a nice smoothness to it. And then I have some fresh basil here, and we're going to chop up some of these leaves, and then we'll add them into our soup. And it will just make some great flavor to it. If you don't have fresh basil, you can definitely add in some dried basil and you'll get that nice little flavor to it. Okay. Again, you don't have to do a super, great job chopping these up because we are going to puree it in our soup so that those will get nice and smaller. So just a couple of loose chops over it. Here. And we'll slide this on here. And we're going to give this a nice mix into our soup. And we'll let that simmer for a second here on there. And since we added in our water, we need to add in a nice big scoop of chicken bouillon. That's going to add the saltiness flavor to our soup for this and a nice richness to the brothy part of it. You could also use vegetable bouillon if you wanted to keep it more, vegetarian. But you want enough to season all of the tomatoes. So we're going to use a whole tablespoon of that because you're going to have over 4 cups of soup once you have it kind of mixed in there. And again, this is in place of using any type of salt. My dog is snoring quite loud over there. Okay. Let's get that running there. We're going to mix in our graham cracker crumbs into our peanut butter base, which will be our base layer of our peanut butter bars. And so you want about 3 cups of it, which I find is either 2 packs of graham crackers, the full-sized one, And this I use a little mixture of it because we use some graham crackers to make some s'mores over the weekend. And then I'm going to use my hand mixer here and just mix them into our peanut butter mixture, and then we'll finish it up with a spatula. So good. But again, the nice chunkiness of these graham crackers really allow for a good amount of texture in our peanut butter bars. And these are like just like the ones that you had like growing up that they served at the school, those delicious. It was always on like a Friday, you could get like a peanut butter bar.
So can you go over what you've added to the tomatoes?
Yes, so we have one whole onion that we diced up, and some fresh garlic, about 2 tablespoons, and then about, I would say, 10 or so Roma tomatoes, and about a cup of water, and a big scoop of chicken bouillon, and about, I want to say, like a fourth to a half a cup of fresh basil chopped up. Okay, here is our lovely peanut butter base to our bars. I'm going to put this in here. This is going to go into a 9 by 12 inch pan. We'll push it down. And then we'll spread it out. You don't need to kind of grease these up or at all, because once you put these in, because you keep these in the refrigerator, once that butter gets cold, it's going to solidify and then they will come out smoothly. So we're going to let this kind of pop up here. And we'll get this kind of going. Here. And then you want to spread it out until you kind of have it all the way into every little bit of this. You don't want it to be your peanut butter part to be too thick, because if it is, that is a lot of peanut butter density. And these are, think about like a homemade Reese's peanut butter cup. This is kind of what these taste like. So spread it out, not too thick on here. And then we'll put our chocolate over it, but we'll press it down with some oiled parchment paper here in just a second to get it a nice kind of flat layer for it. But we want to kind of get it moving and grooving here. And there. We got that out. Slide these guys in here. Okay, try and get it all off my spatula as best as I possibly can for this. And then what we're going to do to press it down, you want to use a little bit of either wax paper or parchment paper, but you want it to be oiled, because if you just try to do it, it will stick a little bit to it. So what I like to do is I'm just going to take this and spray it with a little bit of olive oil to get it to kind of, cling onto it. So it kind of creates a non-stick surface. Now the wax paper, parchment paper, it does fairly good, but you'll get a little bit of stickage if you do. There we go. And this way it will allow you to push these down and make a nice solid base without it coming up when you pull it up again. There we go. So here is our delicious kind of base layer for it. And what you want to do is you want to either put this in the fridge to chill or in the freezer just to kind of get going. These are bars that you're going to eat cold, so they are delicious that way. You slide this in here. Getting stuck. Perfect.
Do you post these recipes anywhere?
So I do. This is a recipe card that I have made available for our members on there, but we do post all of our lives so that our lives are available for everybody to watch and recreate again from them. So we do have those available. Give this a quick little stir here. And because we are at a good little stopping point right now before we get like our person's about to be here. So we're going to take a quick pause. I'm going to turn my soup down to a simmer and we'll let it here. We're going to let this continue to melt and then we'll be back in about 10 minutes to finish up the rest of lunch here because then we are back here. So just to kind of recap what we were making before we had to take our quick little break, we have our tomato basil soup. So we have a whole yellow onion diced up, sauteed with some olive oil, about 2 tablespoons of fresh garlic, around 10 or so Roma tomatoes quartered, and about 1/4 cup of fresh basil. So these are all in our lovely soup stewing up right here. And with about a cup of chicken broth and or a cup of water with chicken bouillon. We'll add some cream in there and just a little bit, and then we'll blend it after it's kind of cooked for a little bit for our nice little basting. We are melting got our little double boiler going on, our chocolate chips with our peanut butter. This is a bag of chocolate chips with 1/4 cup of peanut butter. This is going to make the delicious chocolatey base to our peanut butter bars that we have chilling in the fridge. I'll grab those out in a little bit and we can talk more about them. But while we're waiting, let's get up on our grilled cheeses. We're going to make a roast beef and cheddar melt today using the last bit of our sourdough bread for this because, you got to have with a, tomato basil soup. What is better than that than a nice little grilled cheese / melt? So we're going to slice up our sourdough bread here to make some delicious sandwiches. I was deciding whether to do like a triple grilled cheese or just, a melt. And I decided with a melt today on here. So we'll get these kind of cut up and nice and ready. And there we go. And then we're going to butter one side of each slice of our sourdough bread. So we've got our nice little bits here. So we're going to just put a little bit of butter on one side. Always try to choose the smoothest side. And I'm going to get my griddle pan starting to warm up here so that we can melt that butter in just a second and get these crisping up. I prepped up this morning. So I made the dough last night and then I let it kind of proof overnight. But I prepped up some new sourdoughs that we'll be baking up soon. I have our traditional loaf, which is probably my favorite, and then a strawberry swirl loaf and a rosemary, black pepper, and garlic loaf. So pretty yummy loaves that we'll have coming up soon. So we've got our butter on just one side of our bread, and we're going to put that side down. You get my pieces that match together. And then for our little cheddar melt, we're going to be using sharp cheddar cheese with some roast beef. We'll give our soup a little bit of a stir here, kind of mix it around.
Judy sent you.
Well, thank you, Judy. We appreciate that. Okay, we're letting these just simmer and infuse those flavors together for this. We've got our sharp cheddar here on here. And that way we can get some good slices going. I don't want to take any plastic with me. Kind of perfect. Nice long ones that fit almost perfectly on our bread today. And then kind of make this little teeny tiny piece right there. And then we're going to do a layer of roast beef for it. Now, when I do my melts, I try not to make the meat portion of it too thick because then it takes forever for the cheese to melt. And really, that's the best part is the cheese. So I'm going to put a couple slices on each one, but you don't have to go super heavy on it. That way you still get that good meltiness for it. So we've got our roast beef here, about 3 slices per each one, kind of put on there. Here we go. And with the, I always try to make sure that my cheese doesn't overflow, but the meat is fine for that in the sense that it's okay if it goes over a little bit. You just don't want your cheese to drizzle over the sides because then when you're toasting it up, it won't, it'll burn on your thing. We're going to keep our griddle pan kind of nice and lower so that it will melt and cook these up, but you don't want to go too fast because sourdough is a thicker type bread. And if you heat your grilled cheese up too fast, your cheese in the middle is not going to get melted. So we got this here, last little bit on it. Perfect. And then we're going to put our top little buttered piece of sourdough on each one for our roast beef melts for them to start kind of cooking up here. Okay, I'm going to move this guy out of the way. And we're going to give our chocolate and our peanut butter base here a mix and see how it is. But I'm going to give my hands a quick rinse. So the peanut butter base in this is really important because otherwise the top layer on this peanut butter bar would be hard and firm. And the little bit of this peanut butter gives it almost like a soft peanut butter texture to it. So I've had them sitting on top of my double boiler here, which is essentially a pot with water boiling underneath. And we're going to mix it until that peanut butter and that chocolate is mixed together. And this is what we're going to drizzle over the top of our peanut butter bars that we have chilling in the fridge. Here, beautiful. And we have no chunks or anything like that, which is perfect, which means these chocolate chips are completely melted through. So I'm just going to turn that off and let that residual steam continue to cook it up through. For our peanut butter bars, I'm going to walk you through those that we made in the first part. And these are like a homemade Rice Krispie treat versus, your old school peanut butter bars that you had like growing up at the school. But we made these with 1.5 cups of creamy peanut butter, a 1/2 cup of room temperature butter. We creamed those together and then we added in 1.5 cups of powdered sugar. Mix that in there. So now you have this kind of sweetened peanut butter mixture. And then we crushed up graham crackers to make about 3 cups of graham cracker crumbs. Mix it in there. I like to leave mine a little bit chunky so that it has this lovely little crunch throughout, kind of gets, breaks up the smoothness. I don't want my bars to be too smooth. Okay, we're going to take our peanut butter here that we've melted and we're going to drizzle this over the top and we'll spread it out for this. And I always like to just chill my bars just a little bit because it just helps it kind of firm up a little bit faster. But these are bars that we are going to keep in the refrigerator because you want that butter to be firm instead of room temperature because then your bar will be nice and firm. Here, make sure we get all of this chocolate on there. Get it in our nice big bowl here. And then we'll spread it around and we're going to add a couple graham cracker letters to the top. But a lot of times I'll do teddy bear or not teddy bears, little graham, like Teddy, I guess they're Teddy Grahams. There we go. Teddy bear's my own little boy. That's always funny. I always said, our son's name is Theodore. We call him Teddy. And I said, we should have made his middle name Graham so he could go by Teddy Grahams. There we go. So we've got all of our chocolate peanut butter mixture out. And we're going to just spread it to the far corners all over the top of our bars here. And you don't want your bars to be too thick of a chocolate layer because these are very rich. Think about homemade like Reese's like peanut butter cups. So good. So slide that up. But again, just the perfect amount in each and every bite. There we go. I'm going to rotate these just a second here. We're done with our water. And while these are cooking up, let's give our soup a little bit of a stir here. I'm going to mix in a little bit of cream and we'll let that simmer together for just a minute or two before we get ready to blend it up. And then we're going to add our little graham cracker letters to the top of our little bars before our chocolate solidifies. Just a little splash here to give you that kind of rich, creamy flavor to it. You don't need a whole lot of cream to get you there. fourth of a cup is probably more than enough. And it always surprises me, how little you need when you use heavy cream to get that creamy richness to it. So I'm going to keep this on a nice low simmer here, and we'll let that kind of cream warm up and simmer together, and then we'll blend this in just a few minutes. Okay, here are peanut butter bars. I saved some of my graham cracker letters to put on here. But like I said, I like to do little Teddy Grahams on here, but we'll see which letters we get out. We've got some N and T. And these are so that when you're cutting it, you can get like a perfect little, kind of a little like square with a letter in it. A lot of times I use these when I'm making like Teddy's little snack for school. And I kind of picked out all the ones that were the letters in his name. Somehow this is a Q, but it doesn't look like a Q very much. Looks almost like a bear. Get these guys in. Little broken ones. I got these at IKEA because, I got to love IKEA. I'm really sad. I heard the one that we normally go to in Memphis is closing down. And so now I'm like, oh no, we always have a soccer tournament there. And now I won't be able to go to my Memphis or my IKEA. But here we've got our little graham cracker letters in there, and then we'll put this in the fridge. When we're done, let it sit. It takes about 2 to 3 hours for the chocolate to kind of firm up. Now, again, we mix that peanut butter in it, so it's not going to be a completely firm chocolate. It will be smoother, which is nice because these are a refrigerated bar, but it does take a minute for it to set. And again, that's why we add that peanut butter in there, because you don't want to have, since they are cold bars, you don't want to have a really firm piece of chocolate on top of them. We'll let these, we've got that first base kind of melted up, and then we'll flip on both sides. Now we are going to blend up our soup in here to make a nice smooth kind of tomato basil bisque. Slide this over here. Back when I was a kid, I remember the first kind of time I had tomato basil soup. It was when we had moved to Nashville, because you always had tomato soup growing up, but not like the creamy tomato basil soup. But there was a bread and company, and there you could get your tomato basil soup in a sourdough bread bowl. And that was just heaven. So delicious. Okay, we're going to scoop up our soup in here so we can blend it up and make it nice and smooth. I like to do mine in a blender because it makes it smoother, but you can definitely use a immersion blender to blend it up as well. Just a lot of times those get a little bit chunky. And I have to say, I just love my Vitamix because it really does make it very, very smooth. Here. Almost got all of these guys in here. And in this soup, we have our whole onion, about 2 tablespoons of minced up garlic, about 10 tomatoes that we quartered up, and I want to say probably between a fourth and a cup and a half a cup of fresh basil chopped up, and then some chicken bouillon, water, and a little splash of cream. Get this all of it in here. And we're going to get this on here ready to blend up in just a second. Make sure you secure your lid. Let me flip our sandwiches here so we can start them crisping up on the other side. I can start to hear the butter sizzle. And I like to do it twice on each side. That first side is kind of heating up the bread and melting it. And then that second time on is toasting it up so you get that perfect little crunch for it. Okay, let's get this guy blended up nice and smooth. I'm going to use my hot soup setting on my blender, which will start it out low, and then it will blend it up high. And it will make it like that perfect smooth base to it. We'll get it there. Once it gets to the high here in about 10 seconds, we'll get here. We'll get through it all. Beautiful. And that is all the blending you need to do. Beautiful. Now, earlier when I added in about a cup of broth with, or water with there, you don't want to add too much liquid. You need to add some because you'll be really thick on its own, But if you add too much, then you're going to have a very watery tomato basil soup. And just look at how velvety rich and delicious this is. And that's just 1 cup of added chicken broth with about, a fourth a cup of cream to this to give you just that really nice thick texture, because when you have it, you want that nice thick soup. Makes it a little bit, rich and delicious. Set that right there. Actually, we'll use this guy. And we're going to give this a nice little stir. Perfect. And then I'm just going to keep it on nice and low for this so that it has a nice kind of light simmer. Let's check out our grilled cheeses here. Well, this is our roast beef and cheddar melt on our homemade sourdough bread. Give this a nice little toast up here. I'm going to turn it up just a smidge higher, and we'll get that nice kind of golden marks on there. And while we're waiting, let me grab my cutting board again. I want to mince up a few bits of fresh basil to top on our soup to get that nice little fresh base for it. You don't need a whole lot, but just a couple to add it, because the basil we added in there is already like cooked through, so it's more mellow. And this will allow us to get that really pop of fresh basil to the top. And then before I do that, let me taste my soup, make sure I don't need to add anything else to it. Again, we added that chicken bouillon, that big scoop of it, so that's going to take care of the saltiness factor of our soup. Perfect. Doesn't need anything. And I find about a heaping spoonful, so about 4 teaspoons of chicken bouillon, helps flavor up the tomato juice and all of that as well. Here. So we've got our fresh basil on there. And let's get this guy just about ready on our grilled cheese here. We're going to toast it up, and I'll get ready to kind of serve this up in just a second. We'll get our plate, and we're going there. Now, the peanut butter bars, they do need to sit for a good while, because if you try to cut into them right now, you'll just have a chocolatey, peanut buttery mess. But by dinner time, or really an hour, hour and a half in the refrigerator, they'll be nice and cool and perfect for enjoying. They've got this nice peanut butter layer to them with that chocolatey goodness on top.
You have a question? Where do you get the pot that you make in the kitchen?
So this is a Staub Dutch oven. I believe it's from Williamson, Sonoma. My mom gave it to me as a Christmas present one year. It actually, the lid has a Christmas tree on it, but you don't use the lid that much when you're making soup. But I really like this Dutch oven. So I have several. I have a lot of Le Creuset and then Staub. But this is the cast iron, a smooth cast iron base for it. So it's really lovely in soups to get that nice kind of caramelization when you're sauteing up your vegetables that I really, really love. And if you're going to do an immersion blender, you don't have to worry so much about nicking your enamel in there when you have a cast iron base to it versus that coated in cast iron like a Le Creuset has. Okay, these are looking mighty fine. Our last little toasting up here on there to get our nice grilled cheeses nice and ready for this. And these are, again, our nice kind of little cheddar melts here for that. I'm going to give it just a smidge of help with a little bit of steam to get that cheddar cheese just a little bit of a heat here. And it doesn't need much to get you that ooey gooey goosey like deliciousness here. We've got our spoon for that. We've got our gorgeous peanut butter bars here with our little letters on there. The base of our peanut butter bars, that's where like you're going to get all that great flavor in it. 1.5 cups of creamy peanut butter with a 1/2 a cup of butter. And then we added in 1.5 cups of powdered sugar, cream those up together, and then 3 cups of graham cracker crumbs. And I like my graham cracker crumbs to be coarsely chopped so that you get this nice little crunch in there. Kind of breaks up the monotony of a very smooth bar. These are looking fabulous. And then we melted for our top layer a whole bag of chocolate chips with 1/4 a cup of peanut butter, which will give you that semi-soft base for the like the peanut butter topping. So when you bite into it, it won't be rock hard. Let's get ready to serve up here. We've got our grilled cheese here. It's looking pretty fantastic. Turn this guy off. And we'll bring these over. Beautiful. Nice kind of golden mark. And we'll get our soup off. We'll be ready to serve up here in just a second. Okay. Let's get our grilled cheese cut in half. Slide in there. For lunch today, we have our roast beef and cheddar melt on our homemade sourdough bread. We use sharp cheddar cheese and roast beef and just a little bit of butter on there for that lovely little crisp up on it. And we are going to be serving it with our homemade creamy tomato basil soup. This is made with onions, garlic, fresh tomatoes, fresh basil, some chicken broth, cream, and then you just puree it up into this lovely, wonderful bisque-like texture. To add an extra little splash of creaminess, you can take your cream and you can give it a slight little drizzle around the top. Again, nice little pop of things. And then we'll top it off with some fresh basil for a nice little burst of fresh, like herby flavor to it. And then when our bars have set up in the fridge, we will have our creamy, delicious peanut butter bars made with peanut butter, powdered sugar, butter, graham cracker crumbs, and chocolate. And that is it for the really delicious treat. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page and search for what we made, our creamy tomato basil soup with our peanut butter bars, and you can always watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my Hexclad griddle pan, my Staub Dutch oven, as well as my knives and cutting boards and all the other things that I use in the kitchen for you guys to check out. But again, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.